sometimes challenge a few folk on blogs around this, is when someone says I'm being agile, the question I ask is, what agile are you being, or what agile are you talking about?
I've seen you ask that question.
Because if someone says I'm being agile and I'm doing this, that, and the other, I'm saying, are you talking about software development? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we know this. And so, for example, then you can then go off and talk about scrums and goodness knows what else. If someone says, well, actually, I'm talking about how we do in the project, and then someone says, and then they start talking Scrum language. Well, that's not right, because one is a software development approach, and the other one is a project management approach, and they're not the same thing.
Hi, and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast for Sunday, the 20th of November 2022. This is your host, Nigel Creaser, and today I've got the second part of my interview with Adrian Pyne, the Agile Beyond IT Guy. Some of you will have been long-term listeners and will be aware that I've started this podcast on a product called Anchor. So when I started, I was working out how do I do it? What do I need to do to get a podcast out? There are all these different things. How do I actually get it out into different podcasting areas? And how do I potentially make some money out of podcasting? And I discovered Anchor. And the answer to every one of my questions really was simple, and it was Anchor. Anchor provides a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distribution your podcast if you're interested in doing one. Best of all, it's free. It's 100% free. And ridiculously easy to use. I can do it on my phone. I can do it on the laptop. It's fab. And now Anchor can match with great sponsors who can advertise on the podcast and hopefully support and pay for some of the stuff that's going on. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing by reading this ad. Anchor will pay me for doing this advert. So the way I use Anchor, and a recent thing that I've started to experiment with, is using the contributor section where someone rings in and leaves a message. You'll have heard earlier on maybe one of my podcasts, people's contributions and questions and queries and thanks. So it's a great way of using it, really. Over the time, I've recorded directly into the app. I've recorded and uploaded. I've recorded on my phone and uploaded at the same time. So it's really flexible. It's for you to do it when you want, where you want, and however you want. So if you've wanted to start a podcast and make some money out of it, why not go to anchor.fm/start. That's anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using it. Okay, I can't wait to hear it. It piqued my interest, the title of your book, Beyond IT, for a number of reasons. It was one from the point of view of thinking of it as in infrastructure projects. That was where my first brain went. Yeah, building a bridge, building a thing. I'm thinking, how agile can you be in something like that? And then obviously, as you just said there, about projects that aren't developing software, and everything's becoming projectized, and it's the thing that it took me a long time to get this agile thing. Still not convinced I'm completely understanding of everything yet, but I'm maybe not alone. But it kind of looked at it, and I look at my and it can be an IT program, it can be anything, but you've got and you've used the word, so I'll use it. So waterfall. We've got a project where we've got to deliver something, and it's the thing that I struggle with sometimes is that we've got something to be delivered here. It has to be delivered here. We don't want any bits early. We just want something delivered here. And traditionally, you'd go, right, let's say it's a building, you're going to decide what you want, design it, fabricate it, build it, do QA maybe for whatever reason, getting signed off, and it's gone live. But then I look at actually what you do when you think about building something like that. Well, you put your footings in, and someone checks the footings are okay, don't they? And then you build the walls, and someone checks the walls are okay. Maybe not in a formal, but an informal manner. Then you do electrics. You have a professional who does the electrics check, and you have the plug. And you have these little iterative bits that get signed off potentially through the construction of a building. And if it's a bridge, or you'll have phases in there that sit within maybe a development phase. You may have designed it in that waterfall fashion, but in your design, when you've got, and I'll take an architect, you've got an architect working with the client, coming up with a design team, thinking of 15 different, well, what about using this material for this roof? Well, we don't know whether that'll work. Let's prove it. Let's do a proof of concept. Oh, that doesn't work. And again, you're in that agile capability, and it's agility within. You can be absolutely agile in a waterfall-like delivery. It's what, and I always saw it as this iterative approach in all of those sections, and that's where I was coming from originally. And trying to think what was new about it, and I couldn't quite square it out in my mind.
There's a bit of a risk there, and unfortunately, it's a trap that lots fall into. I'm not saying you have, but it is a trap lots fall into, and that. Agility is not defined by an iterative life cycle. In fact, the Agile Manifesto, the Agile principles, don't mention the word iteration. They merely say you should deliver value regularly, deliver stuff regularly to the client, which may imply iteration. It doesn't have to. And it's one of the biggest problems that when people are trying to apply agility to running a project, because most agile software development approaches are based on an iterative cycle, like Scrum, with its repeated sprints, there is an assumption made that you have to have an iterative life cycle if you're going to do a project in an agile way. That doesn't even make sense to me, because if you then turn that on its head, what that means is that the only time you can do a project with agility is if it requires and should have an iterative life cycle. No other project can possibly be done agile. And that doesn't even make sense, as well as I can point physically to dozens of projects and programs that have waterfall life cycles, mixtures, especially in programs. I've run goodness knows how many programs, or set them up, where a program has got a number of projects in it. Some of those projects are doing waterfall life cycles. Some of them are doing iterative life cycles. It's whatever is necessary to the project. And it comes back to the point again, the reason I read the book, because there's an awful lot more to project management than a life cycle. So there's risks, there's issues, there's finance, there's document control, there's leadership, there's stakeholder management, communication, change control, There's an awful lot more to project management than a life cycle. So to define agility and agile project management in terms of a life cycle, and worse, to then say you can only have an agile project if you've got an iterative life cycle, I won't use the B word, but it's really stupid. But it's a mistake a lot of people make, and a lot of proselytizing agilists say, no, an agile project has to have an iterative life cycle, and they don't question that. And they may as well say the Earth is flat. Well, you can say it, but it's really easy to prove it isn't true.
Yeah. Can we drill down on that just to give my brain a thing? So, where you say an agile piece of work doesn't need to be iterative, because when I think it, maybe I'm using the wrong words with iterative, but when I think of that, I think of you will build something and you'll release it. You'll build something, you'll release it, and that's what that delivering that early value is. It sounds like from what we just said that's different in the concept the way you think you're talking about it, in the fact that it's I don't know how to put it into words. It's kind of how do you explain that non-iterative agile delivery? Give it an example, say, sort of that, to kind of bring it
let me give an example. A number of years ago, I was asked to help set up and get going one of the biggest programs, change programs, one of our supermarkets had ever done. And they were, I've got to say, their senior management were amazing. They said, look, this may be the biggest single change program we've ever done, but we're going to empower it. We want the whole thing managed in an agile way, and we're going to empower you to do so. This particular supermarket, they actually had a pretty mature and effective internal project management capability. So they had some great professionals already who are very, very used to their very, in terms of management capability, management maturity model. They were easily sort of level 3.5, almost level 4 in most areas of their project management capability. They're really good at projects. And they said, no, we're going to do this one agile, and they really did the empowerment stuff. So this program. And it had one of the two biggest projects in it was a agile software development project, and that was done using Scrum. And in point of fact, we defined 3 Scrum teams working in parallel to scale the level of development required in the time that the company wanted it done. So we had 3 Scrum teams. And that was quite interesting backlog prioritization and management, I can tell you.
Yeah.
So that was fun. So that was definitely with an iterative life cycles in those, because they were using scrums and sprints.
Yeah.
Then there was an engineering piece that was modifying some bought-in kit, off-the-shelf kit, and that was done waterfall to do that. We come out to the software bit for the moment. Because we had to scale this up, and there were going to be, we planned for 3 phases of implementation, or 3 phases of development leading to 3 separate implementations staggered about 3 months apart. But that meant that we were not going live with any software for the first one was 6 months. So we were doing a sprint, and we had working software tested, and then it was basically banked. And then the next one, bank all that software. None of it going live. Of course, because of the scale of what we were doing, there was a lot of integration testing to do, system testing to do, and stuff, which again, an awful lot of people, when they get hooked on, I'm producing working software out of my scrums, completely forget that usually, especially in biggish organizations, it's got to go into some kind of release testing before, not many Scrum teams have the luxury of producing working software that then immediately goes live without any other intervention. That just doesn't happen very often. So it's what they're coming up with is actually working software, not live software. That's different. Yeah. And that's what we did. We banked this stuff. So for 6 months, we did not have anything live until we were ready to go with the first implementation. That was it. So so we're still working on iterative stuff, and fortunately, it was done very well by really capable people. So we didn't have much rework when it went off into integration testing, release testing, and all of those other fine things. We didn't have much stuff thrown back over the wall saying, no, you need to make these changes, otherwise it's going to cause problems in live operation because it'll interfere with this stuff over here and stuff. And which was good. I'm pleased to say. But so it wasn't a pure iterative thing. We had to, if you like, be agile and adapt how we used scrums in order to actually say what's the best way to go live and stuff. And there was there was an initial thing that says, are we going to use waterfall to get to our first 6 months? And we just turned and said, no, we actually want to have the confidence of having modules of software that we know are tested and functionally do and perform as they're supposed to. And that was a big confidence boost that we had these things that we knew would work when they went live if they didn't interfere with something else. And that was brilliant, and that was absolutely appropriate to use that as opposed to waterfall. It was, if you like, a kind of waterfall, because we just banked all of that lot until we were ready to go live, and then we went live with the whole lot. So.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I can see, and I've tried to do things like this and kind of been challenged both in my own head and by other people, where I've kind of gone. We were doing some testing one time where it was application virtualization, and we were testing stuff, and we were having to test it, remediate it, put it out, and the way I put it in was we didn't know which ones didn't work, so we didn't know which ones needed remediation. So we had to go through the processes of working out which ones did, and then they'd go into the backlog for the ones that were going to be remediated. Then they go to remediation. Then we'd have to work out what remediation was needed. But you had the phases of, right, this batch we're going to drop into the evaluation. This batch we'll get into the working out what we're going to do it. Then get them resolved. Then bring it into the testing. And very similar to what you said there was I kind of controlled them in a similar manner, but I was kind of challenged back a couple of times with going, that's not agile, or that's not waterfall. And I had that endemic issue, and I don't know how you get that. I've had quite a lengthy conversation with someone saying, but when will the stuff in the sprint be finished? And it's kind of like, oh, sorry, when will the sprint finish? And it's kind of like, on that date. Yeah, but when will it finish? Well, on that date. And it kind of had quite an obvious conversation, and the person I was talking to didn't understand the concept of a sprint. They were asking the wrong question, and maybe I was being a little facetious in when will the content that went into that sprint be finished. Now that was a different conversation, but I wasn't really, I think at that time I wasn't really listening behind the question. And I have found a difficulties with me with Agile is understanding that ability to report upwards how when we will finish, because there's a case of we've got a number of items, we're pulling it down, when are you going to get it done? And the endemic thing I see in there is sort of pictures of a skeleton with a project manager waiting for someone to update the Jira ticket, kind of commentaries and things like that, which I have some empathy with, and I have empathy both sides, because if I didn't have to, and it's the usual conversation with anyone, if I didn't spend all my time updating the reporting system, I'd be able to get on and do the job. But by the same virtue, if you complete the job and don't report it as completed, no one knows it's completed, therefore it can't be used. It's pointless doing it. So it's kind of, but I think that's an endemic issue, isn't it?
I know a software company that's it's actually one of the founders is a very long time friend and client of mine. In fact, I've just written a short article that's going to appear, I think, in November edition of HR Director magazine. But it's more about how the organisation works and how they dealt with remote working and as being a virtual organisation and being agile. And they use Jira as well as various other bits of software, but they use Jira for all their development work. But they've kind of got to a point where they're quite slick at using it, and they use it as, because obviously everyone's been working at home. I mean, in point of fact, they've been a virtual organisation since they really started about 6 years ago. People do come in for major design meetings and stuff, but otherwise most people work from home. And so how do you performance manage people who are working from home? And the simple answer, well, it's not just relying on the tool, but the Jira tool was at the heart of that, because it provides visibly and non-intrusively. You've got a really, really good picture of how individuals are doing with the work that's allocated to them, or the work that, if they're grabbing, in many cases, they're saying, I've done this, it's tested, it's ready to go, and I'm grabbing this other bit now, and I should get on with this. So they use that as part and parcel of it's how they trust their people to work at home, because everyone's got fantastic visibility of progress. And stuff, but I know in other organisations, it's the way it's implemented. It can seem a bit top heavy. So I've heard what you relate to me. I've seen again and again and again. So it's never an easy, simple solution. But that's one company that, at least at the scale they are at the moment, they've cracked it. If they get 10 times bigger, we'll see. I hope they do.
Yeah, I suppose where people have come from as well is that if you've got organisations where from day one that's the way things are done, then immediately that just becomes part of that. And if you're part of a team who is in a Scrum team, say for example, and you're the one that never updates the Jira tickets and everyone else does, the rest of the team are going to start quite quickly coming down on you, aren't they? And I suppose it's that thing, isn't it, of having, if you've got enough.
Yeah.
No, you won't. No. Yes, but if there's no consequences, then it's another thing you can avoid, because you can get on and do some other stuff, I suppose. It's an interest. The problem with agile and agility is it's such a huge can of worms, I think. We can talk about, because the things that come to my mind is around scaling it, and because that's my next. One of my next areas of study for my own personal training is kind of like how, as most of my work I do is program and portfolio management, and being able to understand the scaling of agile deliveries, or agility delivery in an agile, delivering with agility. There, I'm trying to get my words right. Yeah, delivering with agility within a team, but being able to manage that organisational need to understand when are we going to get what we need, when are we going to get our benefits, and have that forward view. Because sometimes they crash gears, don't they, on the fact that having that predictability of when you're going to get it, that in quotes you got with a waterfall model, in that you spent 2 years planning it, and then you know that in 6 months you'll get it. But quite often the plans, you know the final plan the day before it goes live, really, because there's things moving around. So there was kind of, it's like a little comfort blanket, wasn't it, where you've got milestones that you're trying to aim, and you can put a RAG status on them. Whereas sometimes with the agility kind of approaches, you don't have that visibility of always when them things come out. But then I suppose when you talked about your one where you're saying, well, we're going to release this we're going to have this software built and parked here. It's how you. I think you said before about the just enough stuff, where it's kind of, people go, when do you think you'll get it done by? Well, I don't know. It's agile. It's kind of a response sometimes.
I think another thing that helps me is. And I have sometimes challenged a few folk on blogs around this, is when someone says I'm being agile, the question I ask is, what agile are you being, or what agile are you talking about?
I've seen you ask that question.
Because if someone says I'm being agile and I'm doing this, that and the other, I'm saying, are you talking about software development? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Okay, so we know this. And so, for example, then you can then go off and talk about scrums and goodness knows what else. If someone says, well, actually, I'm talking about how we do in the project, and then someone says, and then they start talking scrum language. Well, that's not right, because one is a software development approach, and the other one is a project management approach, and they're not the same thing. A simile I've sometimes used is bananas and oranges are both fruit. So if you like, bananas and oranges are both agile, but they look and taste completely different. And I've got a mate of mine who's allergic to anything citrus. So if I say to him, oh, can I get you some fruit? And he'll say, yeah, but don't get me anything citrus.
Yeah.
So whereas if I say, I'm going to get some fruit, and I give him some fruit and it's an orange, then that's going to make him ill. So I've found it helpful myself to think about and to advise other people to think about when they're saying, I want to talk about agile, what agile are they talking about? And this only tends to be a problem when people are conflating software development agility and project management agility. I've talked to loads of people in other areas where agility is being used, in marketing and engineering, in product development, in construction, finance, and they don't have this confusion. But because, of course, so much IT development has been done within the wrap of a project or program for decades, the two seem intimately linked in the minds of people, and it can be difficult. But if folk can actually separate out and they say, well, what agile am I talking about? I'm talking about software development. That helps people separate in their mind, and they're not gonna then sort of confuse it. And one reason why that's important is around my other big soapbox thing, which is when people have written for years that Scrum is project management, and it isn't. And there's a really simple way to demonstrate and prove that it not just isn't, but it can't be.
Yeah. Where's the risk management? Where's the scope management?
Again, I've got a diagram in the book about that, and it shows a typical Scrum diagram, and then I stick it in the context of any old project. And there's so much more that a project will do, even if it's an IT-enabled project. It's not just producing software. What are you going to do with that software? Who's going to use it? Do they need training? You might even need to build an entire new computer center, or this, that, and the other. So there's all sorts of stuff that an organization has to do to be able to use the software that's being produced. And the project does all that stuff as well. Gets all that stuff ready as well. So Scrum doesn't say anything about that. Scrum doesn't say anything about business cases or anything like that. So the only way to make agile software development methods look like project management is to make them look like project management and add in all the stuff that they're missing. But you come across the artworks of Heath Robinson, who produced drawings of amazing machines to peel potatoes and highly complex things. Scrum made into project management is a Heath Robinson drawing. It's just weird and wonderful, and it might work, but it'll work pretty terribly. And why would you? Why? When you've already got, oh look, Blue Peter-like, here's a project management approach. If you want to do it agile, it's far easier to say, well, what does risk management look when it's done in an agile way? What does scheduling look when it's done in an agile way? What does leadership look like when it's done in an agile way, etc. That's much easier to do, and that's what this does.
That's really because it's really good, because we're it's formulating in my head now what you're talking about, and it's something that it's kind of one of those things that's sat square with me because people go, we're an agile project organization, we're delivering things agilely as project. And as you say, isn't what you need. What they're saying is we're doing the engineering part of this project using agile or with agility or using Scrum. Yeah. And even the test bit as well to some extent. It's the doing, not the organising and the managing that's being done. But then again, seeing that point that you just said there is you can use those methods of agility and that approach of agility for the planning, for the risk management, because it's kind of I can see you could sit a wrapper around there. Risk management's a great one there for I think that you sit your wrapper around there and just go right. Okay, how are we going to manage risk? Right, here's our list of assumptions that we've got on our backlog. Great. So what tasks are we going to break down? You could use Scrum to do risk mediation, but that's a way of doing it. Or you could use one of the complicated risk management toolings that you get out there. You could be sitting there with the lovely Agile poker cards that I've got sat on here to decide on how complex a risk might be, but it's all using the same tools and approaches, but not fixating on it being agile. It's fixating on what's the outcome that you want out of it.
So again, that's what I've tried to do for a few years now. I've tried to say, first of all, think about what you mean by when you're saying I'm being agile. And if you're talking about software development, that's fine. There's loads of amazing stuff, wonderful stuff that's had 20 odd years to describe and evolve what different kinds of or adaptations of agile software development looks like. And that's just brilliant. But then if you're saying, well, actually, I want to do project management agility, right, forget the software development bit. Forget whatever development approach you are doing and just think about the components of project management and what they look like when you apply the principles and the values in the Agile Manifesto to them. And I can give you an example around leadership that I use in the book and I've described many, many times on courses or presentations and stuff. And there's two things here. First of all, great management professionals might usually have a particular management leadership style, but great professionals adapt their style to the needs of the project, of the organization, of the moment. That's what professionals do. That is agility. But if someone says, well, okay, but generically, what's an agile leader look like? I'll say things, I'll give it perhaps a different slant on it. Now, for many years as a project professional, I was a control freak and I got so stressed in so many years because I had to keep my finger on not just my pulse, but everyone else's. I had to be in absolute control. And then something called blood pressure came along, and I thought there's got to be a better way so that I don't die. So I started thinking, well, if I've got a team who are the right people to do, say, this work package, and they know how much time they've got, and they know the budget, the bit of the budget they're working within, and they know what they've got to produce, why don't I let them get on with it and just look over their shoulder, as opposed to sitting in their laps all the time? And I liken it to a parent teaching their kid to ride a bike, and there comes that moment, the stabilizers are off, and there comes that moment when the parent takes their hand off the back of the saddle or off the back of the child, and the child goes a little bit wobbly, and then as they go a bit further, they're getting more stable, they're getting more confident, and they're cycling away on the two wheels. And that's great. But what's the parent doing? The parent is not having let go and then stood still, watching their child wobble or fall over or go for a holly bush or a dog or another child. They're kind of trotting along behind, keeping enough in touch so that they either intervene if they get a shout of "mummy" or "daddy," or they think, there's a dog, I need to just sort of help, step in and help. That I love that notion of agile leadership. It's it's what I call hands-off leadership. It's not letting the kid go away on the bike and standing still and never doing anything and not being in a place where they can help. It's keeping in touch, but otherwise, if things are going fine, you don't need to intervene.
Yeah,
that to me, fabulous example of agile leadership.
I think it's really good. Yeah, really good. And I think the thing to build on that a little bit is, at times you, as a manager and a leader, you let go a little too far, and they'll fall over and graze their knee, kind of thing. Same as with the kid, but that's and that'll be a reflection of how far you step back, and also maybe the amount of coaching and training that the team need in order to avoid those things. And sometimes it's just bad luck, and that's it. And we've all got to learn a lesson sometime, isn't it? So I do like that analogy.
Absolutely. But what it also says is, leading a project is not just about the leadership style and the level of engagement, but it's then also around, shall we say, the process side of things. How are you actually measuring progress? So that hopefully, you'll get the feedback that enables you to say, I'm actually getting a bit too far away from this. I need to be closer to it because I can see things starting to go wrong. So it goes right back to the really great point and question you raised about being a bit agile. I do the same thing in sort of projects. Project management agility is in a project is about how you do all of the assurance. It's not just about leadership. It's not just about how you do scheduling. It's not just about how you do risk management. It's not just about how you manage stakeholders. But your agile project management approach should be holistic, and then should be linked in. That's the stuff inside the project, and then should be linked into what's happening outside. And that's where an organization needs to be prepared to modify its normal governance to support agile working. And an APM, I was lucky to work with some great people on producing a short guide to, I think it's called Directing Agile Change, which is an APM guide to agile governance and everything, which I think is quite a good little beast.
Brilliant.
I don't get any royalties from that one.
I'm just scribbling out. You shouldn't be talking about other people's books, but and going back to your.
It's fine. I mean, I was co-author of that, and also the Agile Assurance short guide as well.
So, I'm just thinking we've been. I knew we'd talk for a while on this.
We're on for a long time. Yes.
Yeah, a good while, and I don't think we've scratched the surface yet, have we? In real terms, and
there's a lot in the book.
Yeah, I was going to say from a point. Yeah, you've mentioned the book. I'll mention it myself as well. And I've done my usual thing. I've started having a skim read of bits of it, start having to get a feel for it, as I always do with all of my interviewees. I say that I like to be dumb when I'm asking the questions on the interviews. And in some ways it's true, but in some ways it's just a little bit lack of prioritisation and time. But if there was,
I love the naive question. It's really powerful.
I hope, and again, that's what I try to do. It means I have to do less work, and I can be naive, and hopefully it'll do there. So that's I'm sticking with it. If people want, if people aren't convinced about understanding and thinking about why they should grab a copy of the book. What would your 2-second pitch for it to be? And I'll give you that chance to do that. And maybe if there's one section in it, if they decided, right, I only want to read one bit of it, which bit would you recommend reading?
Probably the early chapters that set the scene and explain the context really, and the point, and the difference. About project management agility. The other thing I'd point people to is I've got on LinkedIn something called the Agile Beyond IT newsletter. So there's some nice bite-sized articles in there that take a lot of the themes that are in the book. So if people want to have some tasters, then take a look at those articles. Yeah.
Cool. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. Brilliant. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, have a conversation, what's the best place for them to get hold of you?
I think if they do it via LinkedIn, my contact details are there. I'm very happy to engage. Brilliant.
Well, thank you very much, Adrian. It's been a fascinating and passionate talk, as I knew it would be.
Thank you, Nigel.
Yeah. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your evening.
Thank you very much indeed. Likewise, and Oswestry is a fabulous place. Excellent.
Yeah. Yes, everybody visit Oswestry. I don't get any commission for Oswestry. Thanks, Adrian.
Take care. Thank you very much once again.
And you. Bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Adrian. Some thought-provoking stuff there around how we think about agility and agility within our businesses, and not just the capital A Agile. Grab his book, it's out now, Agile Beyond IT. You can get a copy in the show notes or jump along to the website, nigelcreaser.com, www.nigelcreaser.com/shop. Next week, I've got Jude Jennison on the show, and we're talking to her about how she's using horses to help people improve their teams, their management, and their leadership. It's a fascinating conversation, so looking forward to sharing that one with you. So have a great week and speak soon. Bye. Wow, you made it this far. I'm guessing that you enjoyed the show if you have, or maybe you've just left it playing in the background and forgot it was on. But if you did enjoy it and you're inclined to, I'd be delighted if you could share the show with your colleagues. Discoverability with podcasts is quite difficult, especially with a niche one like this. But sharing with your colleagues and letting them have a chance to listen to these fantastic guests would be brilliant. If you've got time, a review on whatever platform you listen to it on would be great too, especially if it's a 5-star one. Again, that makes it easier for people to discover the show when they're searching on there, because the comments raise it up the old search engine optimization on all the different tools. If you are feeling flush, I have a couple of ways you could contribute. One is Patreon, Patreon/Sunday Lunch PM, and you can donate some money to the podcast that way, or you can jump along to my website, nigelcreaser.com, www.nigelcreaser.com, and click on the link to the shop, and in there you've got all my books that I've created in the varying different guises, a number of different ways you can grab a copy of those. And down the bottom I've got the my guests' books, so everyone who's been on here, if they've had a book, I've got a link to their book in there, and Amazon give me a little bit back for when someone buys from them. But more importantly, if you come back next time and listen, I'll be delighted. So I'll leave you alone and let you get on with your day now. Thank you. Bye.